The San Jose Civic Auditorium didn't just fill up that night, it swelled. Like a living organism, the air inside seemed to expand and contract with every murmur, every shuffle of feet. By 5 p.m., every seat had been taken. By 6 p.m., the aisles were jammed. By 7 p.m., the fire marshal had stopped letting people in, but still they pressed their faces to the glass doors, desperate for even a sliver of the view. The overhead lights were cold and merciless, slicing through the room and leaving no shadows to hide in. Every movement on stage would be naked to the cameras, every blink, every twitch, every tightened jaw muscle, immortalized by the dozens of lenses aimed at the podiums. Somewhere in the middle rows, an elderly veteran in a worn ball cap sat next to a young mother clutching her purse. Behind them, 2 college students whispered predictions, their eyes darting toward the stage like gamblers watching a roulette wheel slow to a stop. Across the country, kitchens fell silent as televisions flickered on. Half-finished dinners cooled on tables. Remote controls clicked as people leaned forward, one hand on their chin, the other gripping the armrest. The text messages flew in short, urgent bursts. It's starting. Get to a TV now. Because tonight was not just a town hall. It was a reckoning. 2 men, each with the weight of a presidency etched into his face. 2 visions of America colliding in real time, and 1 nation holding its collective breath. On the left, Barack Obama, 44th President of the United States, carrying a calm that could slice sharper than rage. On the right, Donald Trump, 45th President, armed with defiance, conviction, and a stack of cue cards as thick as a phone book. There was no warm-up act, no patriotic music to soften the edges, no jokes to ease the tension. Just the hum of the cameras, the faint buzz of fluorescent lights, and an electric stillness that told everyone in the room and everyone watching at home that whatever happened next, they would remember for the rest of their lives. Donald Trump strode onto the stage first. His entrance was deliberate, almost theatrical, chin up, jaw tight, scanning the crowd like a prizefighter stepping into the ring. In his left hand, a thick, uneven stack of cue cards, some bent at the corners, some scribbled over in bold Sharpie strokes. They were clutched together, not neatly arranged, but stuffed with talking points, applause lines, and half-finished statistics. Behind him, his aides lingered, just out of the camera's frame, exchanging quick, hushed words. They looked like stagehands in a play, and the star had just walked on. Then from the opposite side, Barack Obama emerged. No entourage, no pile of props, just 3 neatly stapled pages in one hand and a single black pen in the other. His stride was unhurried, his eyes scanning the audience not as a challenge but as a greeting. If Trump's arrival was a drum roll, Obama's was a steady heartbeat. The contrast was impossible to miss. One man carried a fortress of words built high but unstable. The other carried a scalpel, small, precise, and sharp enough to cut through the noise. This wasn't just a meeting of political opponents. It was a collision of philosophies, a battle not for volume, but for reality itself. Trump had come armed with sheer force, the energy to overwhelm, to dominate the stage by speed and repetition. Obama had come armed with focus, the patience to wait to strike only when the facts could land like a hammer. 2 men, 2 arsenals, 2 Americas. And in the minutes ahead, the country would learn which weapon was stronger, noise or truth. Near the center of the packed crowd, just behind the front row, a single hand held up a small white sign. It wasn't flashy. No glitter, no neon, no oversized letters. Just 2 words written in black marker, "Truth matters." The cardboard wobbled slightly as the person holding it shifted their weight, but those words stayed steady, bold, uncompromising, impossible to ignore. The cameras didn't catch it at first. The networks were busy panning across the big banners and the choreographed applause. But the people sitting nearby noticed. Some nodded, some stared, and a few smiled like they had just been reminded why they were there. It wasn't a slogan for one side or the other. It wasn't a campaign promise. It was a demand. Truth matters. It was as if the entire night could be boiled down to that single phrase, an unspoken challenge to anyone who would take the stage. The irony was neither Trump nor Obama had seen it yet, but they would. And before the evening was over, that sign would feel less like cardboard and more like a prophecy. Because in this room, truth wasn't just a value. It was going to be a weapon, one sharp enough to cut through every speech, every statistic, every smokescreen. And somewhere deep in the hum of anticipation, you could feel it the moment that sign would stop being just a message in the crowd and start being the battle cry that cracked the room wide open. From the middle of the audience, a man stood up slowly. His posture was straight, but his voice carried the weight of years in front of a classroom. He introduced himself simply, Daniel Cortez, high school history teacher, Fresno, California. Then came the question. Short, direct, sharp enough to make the entire room still. How do we separate the truth from political spin? For a moment, the space between the two podiums felt like it stretched a mile wide. The words floated there, heavy, almost dangerous. It was the kind of question that didn't care about applause lines. It wasn't fishing for compliments or party loyalty. It demanded something raw, something real. You could feel the shift in the air. Some in the crowd leaned forward, eager to hear an answer. Others folded their arms as if bracing for disappointment. The camera zoomed in on Obama's face, calm, unreadable, then on Trump's eyes, narrowing, as if calculating the safest route through a minefield. This wasn't just a teacher's question. It was a challenge, and behind it, an unspoken warning. If you can't answer this, nothing else you say tonight will matter. That's why the question split the room in two between those who believed the truth could still be clear and those who feared it never would be again. Obama didn't answer right away. He let the silence sit for a moment, letting the weight of Daniel's questions settle over the room. Then slowly he leaned toward the microphone. Numbers are like snapshots. He began his voice low but steady. But step back and the whole album tells the truth. A murmur rippled through the audience. It wasn't a flashy line. It didn't come with shouting or finger pointing. But it landed because here's the thing, he wasn't speaking in metaphors for long. Obama reached down, lifted the small stack of papers he had carried onto the stage, and held them up for the cameras to see. These, he said, tapping the pages lightly, are from the U.S. Department of the Treasury and the Bureau of Labor Statistics, both run by the current administration. He paused. Not for drama, but for clarity. They show that while job growth was announced at a 10-year high last month, 43% of those jobs were temporary or part-time positions without benefits. The words hung in the air like a blade. No yelling, no insult, just receipts. The cameras cut to Trump, his jaw tightening, his eyes narrowing, but Obama didn't look his way. Instead, he kept his gaze on Daniel, the teacher, who had asked the question as if to say, "This is your answer. No spin, just the truth." And that was the moment the first real crack appeared in the wall Trump had built around his narrative. Not because Obama attacked him, but because Obama had used his own administration's numbers to pull that wall apart. Trump's hand shot toward the microphone. Not the slow, controlled movement of a man taking his turn, but the sharp, impatient grab of someone who felt the floor slipping away. His voice came in fast, cutting across Obama mid-sentence. "That's not true. That's absolutely false." The volume was higher now, the rhythm quicker, as if speed alone could erase what had just been said. But the pitch betrayed something. A strain. A crack in the armor. For the first time that night, his face shifted. The practiced half-smile was gone. His jaw worked harder, lips pressing into a thin line before pulling back into words that came too quickly, too defensively. The crowd reacted not with full applause or full boos, but with that low electric murmur that fills a room when everyone realizes they're witnessing a turn in the game. Because the energy had changed. Trump wasn't dominating anymore. He was reacting. His eyes darted briefly toward the moderators as if searching for an opening, then back to Obama, but Obama didn't flinch. He stood still, hands resting lightly on the podium, watching, waiting. And in that stillness, the contrast sharpened. One man was straining to regain control. The other had no need to. The shift was subtle, but everyone in that auditorium and everyone watching at home felt it the moment the fight stopped being Trump's to win and became Obama's to lose. She rose from her seat, slowly clutching the microphone like it was the only thing keeping her steady. Her name was Laura Benton, owner of a small family-run hardware store in Flagstaff, Arizona. Her voice trembled at first, but it wasn't weakness. It was the kind of tremble that comes from holding something in for too long. "I applied for pandemic relief," she began, eyes fixed on the podiums. "I qualified. I was told the funds were coming." Her breathing hitched, but they never came. A hush settled over the room. Even the camera operators slowed their movements. "I had to lay off 2 employees. People who've worked with me for over a decade. One has kids, the other he's like family." Her voice cracked on the word family, and she pressed her lips together to keep from breaking down. Trump leaned forward, his tone brisk. "Well, Laura, first of all, I'm sorry you went through that. But that's the state's fault. Democrat-run states created the delays. We sent the money out fast. He straightened up clearly, expecting the explanation to land and move things along. Obama didn't move right away. He flipped through his papers, his eyes scanning until he found what he wanted. Then in that calm, unshakable tone, he spoke. Laura, what you experienced isn't a state glitch. According to the U.S. Treasury's own oversight report, over 120,000 small business applications were approved but never funded. Those applications died in the federal pipeline. The words were simple, but they hit like a hammer. Laura blinked as if trying to process that number. A murmur swept the audience, a mix of disbelief and anger. And in that moment, the story stopped being about statistics. It was about a woman with a store, 2 lost jobs, and a truth that no one on that stage could spin away. He stood with the slow, deliberate motion of someone whose back had carried decades of weight. Frank Miller, 68 years old, a retired auto mechanic from Detroit. His hands were thick scarred, the kind of hands that told a story before a single word was spoken. His voice was steady, but there was no mistaking the heaviness in it. I worked 38 years for the same company, he said. Never missed a shift, never called in sick, and when I retired, my pension was supposed to be there. He paused, his jaw tightening. It's gone, frozen, just gone. The silence in the auditorium was different this time, deeper, heavier. My question is simple, Frank said, his eyes moving between the 2 men on the stage. How is it legal for a company to take the money I earned and vanish it? How is that fair? Trump was quick to answer, leaning into the microphone. Frank, I understand your frustration, but sometimes companies have to make tough decisions to stay afloat. We've passed laws to make sure corporations can keep operating, so more people don't lose jobs. A few heads in the crowd nodded, but most didn't. Obama's gaze didn't leave Frank. His voice was low, precise. Frank, that's not saving anyone. That's looting with permission. The words landed with a sharpness that made some in the audience draw in a breath. Because it wasn't just about Frank. It was about every worker who gave their life to a company and got a thank you card instead of a retirement. At first, it was just a few hands. A couple of people in the middle rows began to clap, hesitant, almost testing the air. Then it spread. The sound swelled from the back of the room, rolling forward like a wave. Chairs scraped the floor as people rose to their feet, one after another, until the auditorium was a forest of standing bodies. They weren't cheering wildly. It wasn't a stadium roar. It was something heavier. It was respect. The applause echoed off the high ceilings, sharp and steady. And then something else happened. In the section where Trump supporters had been sitting, the ones in red caps and Keep America Great shirts, a shift was happening. No boos, no shouts, just silence. Some crossed their arms, others stared at the stage, their expressions unreadable. But one thing was clear, the certainty they'd walked in with was cracking. Obama didn't smile. He didn't acknowledge the standing ovation. He simply lowered his gaze to the next question card, letting the moment hang in the air like smoke. Trump adjusted his notes, glanced toward his section of the crowd, and for the first time avoided eye contact. It started as a quiet exchange, the kind you might almost miss if you weren't paying attention. Trump had just launched into another defense, painting a picture of record economic growth and streets filled with opportunity. His hands moved wide, as if sculpting a world only he could see. Obama didn't interrupt. He didn't roll his eyes or shake his head. He waited, patient, still. Then when Trump paused to breathe, Obama leaned slightly toward the mic. His voice was low, so low the room instinctively leaned in. You can't throw a parade in the rubble. That was it. 7 words. 43 seconds from pause to impact. No shouting, no insult. Just a truth dropped with surgical precision. The words cut through the air like glass breaking. People froze mid-clap, mid-shift in their seats, because everyone knew what he meant. You can't celebrate prosperity when neighborhoods are still boarded up. You can't claim victory while families are still digging out from loss. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was loaded, heavy, waiting. And in that pause, you could feel it, the momentum in the rooms swinging hard in one direction. It didn't take hours. It didn't even take minutes. 43 seconds after Obama's words hit the air, the internet caught fire. Clips of the moment ripped from live streams were already flooding TikTok. One user added slow motion, zooming in on Trump's face right after the phrase landed. Another looped the line over dramatic music, turning it into a rallying cry. On Twitter, the hashtag #ShajParade in the rubble exploded, leaping to the #1 trending spot worldwide in under 12 minutes. Right behind it, Shaj, your Treasury report began climbing, a direct jab at the financial numbers Obama had used to dismantle Trump's argument. YouTube wasn't far behind. Reaction videos sprouted like wildfire, commentators, political analysts, even comedians breaking down the 7 words that stopped a room cold. One viral tweet read, "This isn't a debate anymore. This is a demolition live on national TV." By midnight, the clip had been viewed over 47 million times across platforms. And the night wasn't over yet. The shift was visible now, not just in the crowd, but in Trump himself. He had been leaning forward earlier, throwing out numbers, waving his hands, dominating the mic. But now his shoulders were tense, his grip on the podium tight, his breathing heavier. And then it happened. His voice louder than before, almost cracking at the edges. "You're trying to make me look bad." It wasn't policy. It wasn't data. It was pure emotion, the kind that slips out when the armor starts breaking. Obama didn't blink. He didn't raise his voice or shift in his seat. He just met Trump's stare with the kind of calm that can't be faked. Truth doesn't change just because it's inconvenient. The words landed with a thud heavier than any accusation. A low murmur spread through the audience, not shock, but recognition. Because everyone in that room, no matter their politics, understood one thing in that moment: this was no longer a fight about party lines. It was a fight about reality itself. Up in the glass booth overlooking the auditorium, the control room wasn't just watching. They were reading the temperature of the room in real time. A producer leaned toward the director, his voice low but urgent into the headset, "Has losing the room." On the monitors, the camera feeds told the whole story. Split screens showed Trump's face from multiple angles, the flush creeping up his neck, the tight jaw, the flicker of his eyes searching for an escape. The director's fingers danced over the switcher, cutting from wide shots of the crowd to tight, unflinching close-ups of Trump. Every frame made it clearer the commanding presence he carried at the start had shrunk. In broadcast, seconds matter. And every passing second, the audience at home could see it too, the unraveling of control pixel by pixel. 15 minutes. That's all it took for the numbers to swing like a wrecking ball. On the giant screen mounted above the media section, the live polling graphic updated in real time. At the start of the debate, Trump held a slim but steady lead, 50% to Obama's 46%. Now the colors were changing, blue bars climbing, red bars sinking. Gasps rippled through the audience as the anchor's voice cracked in disbelief. "We are seeing an unprecedented shift. Obama is now up by 14 points, weight correction. That's 20 points over Trump." It wasn't just numbers. It was the visual of a political tide turning right there on live television with millions watching. In living rooms across America, people sat forward in their chairs, eyes locked on the screen. They weren't just witnessing a debate, they were watching history rewrite itself minute by minute. She stood up from the second row, still in her scrubs, the kind of deep blue that told you she had just come straight from a shift. A laminated hospital badge swung gently from her pocket. Her voice was steady, but her eyes carried years of exhaustion. "What will you do about medical debt? My patients survive cancer but lose their homes." Trump adjusted his mic, leaned forward, and launched into a familiar refrain about tax cuts, job creation, and how a stronger economy would solve the problem. Then Obama spoke. He didn't cite a study or quote a statistic. He told a story about a father in Ohio, a steel worker who had health insurance, paid his premiums on time, and still went bankrupt when his daughter's cancer treatments hit the 1 million mark. He didn't lose his home because he was lazy, Obama said quietly. He lost it because his little girl wanted to live. The room fell silent. It was the difference between numbers on a page and a life you could feel in your bones. From the back of the auditorium, a young woman stepped up to the microphone. Her voice was soft, but the stillness it brought to the room was louder than any applause that night. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, took a breath, and said, "Both of you stop attacking each other. Tell me, what will you actually do to help my generation?" The question sliced through the atmosphere like a clean blade. No talking points, no rehearsed zingers. Just a raw, urgent plea from someone who would live with the consequences long after the cameras shut off. Trump shifted in place, the smirk gone. Obama's eyebrows lifted slightly, not in surprise, but in recognition of the weight behind her words. This wasn't about winning the night anymore. It was about answering a question they couldn't dodge: the future. and for a brief, rare moment, both men paused as if deciding whether they could truly meet her gaze and give her something real. Trump leaned into the microphone, his voice louder now, as if volume could fill the gaps in his plan. We're going to cut taxes, open factories, and drill for more oil than you've ever seen before. He declared, his hand chopping the air in sharp, deliberate gestures. The words drew some cheers from his usual supporters in the back rows, but for many in the room, especially the younger audience members, it felt like watching a rerun. No timelines, no specifics, no how, just the same slogans that had been thrown around for years. Erica, still standing at the mic, tilted her head slightly. Her expression didn't change, but the silence in the room said everything. This wasn't the answer she or her generation had been waiting for. On the giant screen above, the live comments from viewers watching online began to scroll faster. "That's it, where's the plan?" sounds like 2016 all over again. Trump moved on, unaware or unwilling to admit that the moment had already slipped away from him. Obama didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He stepped toward the microphone, glanced briefly at Erica, and began. 3 steps, 3 stories. 1. Affordable education. A young man in Detroit works nights so he can pay for community college. He's 1 semester away from becoming a paramedic, but a $900 tuition bill might end his dream. I want him in the field saving lives, not serving coffee because he couldn't afford school. 2. Universal health care. A mother in Arizona has 2 jobs, full insurance, and still had to crowdfund her child's surgery. That's not health care, that's gambling with a child's life. No American family should have to pass the hat to save their kid. 3. Sustainable infrastructure. A small-town bridge in Iowa collapsed last winter, cutting off an entire community from their nearest hospital. Rebuilding isn't just about roads, it's about making sure you can get an ambulance in time to save a life. When he stopped speaking, the room wasn't buzzing, it was still. Not the stillness of boredom, but the kind where people are holding their breath, replaying the images in their minds. 3 steps, 3 real people. 3 futures that felt possible. By the time the debate ended, the real fight had already moved to the newsrooms. On CNN, MSNBC, even Fox News, the same 43-second clip of Obama saying, "You can't throw a parade in the rubble," played on a loop, over and over and over again. Producers slowed it down, froze the moment, added captions in bold white letters. It wasn't just a quote anymore, it was a headline, a rallying cry. Talk show hosts debated its meaning. Political analysts dissected its delivery. Late-night comedians turned it into punchlines. But even the jokes carried an undertone of respect. Then came the unexpected twist. A Fox News panelist, a longtime Trump defender, leaned forward and admitted on live TV he landed punches tonight. No doubt, within minutes that soundbite was trending too. The internet had its own verdict, and it wasn't waiting for official polls. In the days that followed, think pieces and op-eds flooded every corner of the internet. Analysts argued over numbers, fact-checkers issued their reports, and campaign strategists scrambled to spin the night's events. But out in the streets, in coffee shops, and grocery store checkout lines, no one was quoting percentages or GDP charts. They were quoting moments. They were replaying feelings. You can't throw a parade in the rubble. Truth doesn't change just because it's inconvenient. Those lines weren't statistics. They were emotional timestamps seared into the memory of everyone who'd watched. People didn't remember the exact data Obama cited. They remembered the stillness in the room. They remembered the way it felt when someone finally said out loud what they had been thinking all along. And that, more than any chart, more than any poll, was what stuck. In the end, it wasn't the volume that won the night, it was the precision. Obama didn't flood the room with words. He chose his moments like a surgeon, choosing where to make the first cut clean, deliberate, impossible to ignore. He let the numbers speak, but only after making sure they had a human heartbeat behind them. Trump didn't lose because he lacked facts. He lost because he didn't treat the audience like they deserved the truth. Instead of inviting them in, he spoke at them, throwing out promises like confetti, colorful but weightless. The real moral of that night was simple: truth doesn't need to shout to be remembered. It just needs to land in a place where people feel it, not just hear it. And when that happens, it doesn't fade. In life, the loudest voice isn't always the one worth listening to. Real power comes from speaking truth with clarity, timing, and respect for your audience. If you want to change minds or hearts, don't overwhelm people with noise. Give them truth they can feel, and they'll carry it with them long after you've stopped talking. If this story made you think, imagine what's coming next. Hit subscribe, Turn on the notification bell and join us for more untold truths the mainstream won't show you. Your voice matters, and together we make it louder.